Welcome back, amazing people, to the Hopeful Majority. I just finished watching the presidential debate. I'm sure you watched the debate between Trump and Harris. This is about to be a reaction that you will not get anywhere else, because while everybody else is asking the question, who won the debate? I'm asking the question, what caused us to get here? Strap in, because this is going to be an interesting conversation. Part one was yesterday. I thought that was a really interesting feedback conversation where we discussed the outrage industrial complex, what is driving candidates. I want to talk to you a little bit about what I saw during that debate that tells me that our system is not able to support the level of polarization. Every Monday, YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Let's get this going. I'll see you on the other side. While everybody else is going to ask who won, every influencer is going to talk about whether or not their candidate, Vice President Kamala, President Trump won. While every pundit's going to tell you to vote this way or that way, while your neighbor's going to be saying, man, I think they did a good job or they did a bad job. Here's what I'm asking myself. And here's what I think most of you are asking yourself. I'm asking myself, we're the greatest democracy of all time, and yet we cannot have a debate without an audience. We are the greatest democracy of all time, and yet our two candidates cannot shake their hands at the end of a debate. We're the greatest democracy of all time, and yet on social media, everybody has their fists clenched and they're scared to see a debate. We live in the greatest democracy of all time, apparently, and yet we're living at a moment where we are nervous about our two leading candidates having a constructive, productive debate. Why? Now, I'm going to have our amazing producer play a quick clip of the amazing students. BridgeUSA, you see the sweatshirt right here. Some of y'all know. Those of you who are new to the show, there are amazing student leaders that are bridging divides in colleges and high schools. They were interviewed by an NBC Bay Area station about what they wanted to see the debate. Let's hear what they wanted to say.
I'm really just looking to hear both sides, hear them talk about it in a very professional manner, so that way I can properly form an opinion.
Like solid policies being discussed, and probably even like live fact checks. That would be great for a debate format like this.
I'm mainly just looking for a mature conversation.
I want to hear both sides. I'm willing to hear them out, but in a way that's honest and truthful.
We want discussion. We want engagement. We want to hear each other. We want to hear substance. We want to hear policy. What do we think? What do we think? I don't know if many of you know this, but this debate was held in the National Constitution Center. My first reaction after this debate, I'll be honest with you, I had a hard time thinking about it, was, man, what is Ben Franklin thinking right now? Now, you know I'm a political nerd. What is George Washington? Yes, George Washington, old George, the man that gave up power voluntarily. What is he thinking right now? Imagine you put them in a time lapse. You put them to this debate. Now, look, I can already hear some of y'all that are Kamala Harris supporters. You can say, I think she did a really good job. I'm not going to lie. Look, the hopeful majority, we focus on how we can bridge our differences and have substantive conversations. It really did seem like at some points she had a productive conversation engagement. Now, if you're a Trump supporter, you might say those ABC moderators, they were too heavy-handed. It looked like 3 against 1. You know, he was almost forced to be angry. Regardless of where you stand on that, the one thing we can all agree on is that we should not let those students in that clip down. We should not let tomorrow down. Importantly, I don't think we should let ourselves down. Why are we putting up with this? Why are we putting up with this? So the question that I have on my mind is, how did we get here? And what is the system that causes us and our candidates to operate in the way they do? Now, in the last episode, part 1 of this 2-part debate special, yes, there's a 2-part debate special, and the hopeful majority reacts. And this is a live reaction, people. The last special, we talked about 3 things. We talked about the fact that we live at a moment where outrage sells. So people are going to talk in a way in which their content will sell. We live at the short clip age. 47-second, 50-second short clips are what are going to decide the real debate. This is not actually the real debate. The real debate is what's going to happen on TikTok tomorrow. So they're commodifying for that content. And the last thing we talked about was the influencers and the analysts are not focused on analysis. They're focused on rage because they care about your attention. That's their driving incentive structure. So given that, and you should check out that last episode, the conversation becomes, well, how did each of these folks play into that structure? Let's take Kamala Harris for a quick second. Vice President Harris. Throughout the debate, her constant flip was, he's the past, I'm the future. And then she would immediately go to saying something like, everything he said is a bunch of lies. right? Why do you think she's saying that? Now, I think she's saying that because she knows that she has to appeal to her base, and she's got to get the people that are right in the middle to absolutely hate President Trump and his supporters. Now, we talked about this in the last episode. Do not let our candidates drive hate for each other. Disagree with our figures, disagree with our political candidates. Do not let that translate to hate for your neighbor, because the one thing we can't give on is each other. Now, there was a fascinating line that Kamala Harris had that I thought was really effective. Kamala Harris said, President Trump is running on problems, not to fix problems. And this was specifically in the context of immigration. Why do you think that was a particularly effective line? The reason why I think that was a particularly effective line was because a lot of voters right now are craving productive dialogue, productive conversations. A lot of us that are part of the hopeful majority were interested in that. So that's why she made those types of claims. Now, interestingly enough, this debate felt a little bit more substantive than previous ones. Now, that's not a high bar. You're like, a little bit substantive? Really? Is that what we're going for? Well, hey, I'm just trying to be empathetic with what Ben Franklin and George Washington are thinking right now. At least that one was a little bit more substantive. So what was the substance? They got a little bit into the policy. They got a little bit into the dialogue of China tariffs. You saw at the start of the debate. In fact, one of the people that I was watching the debate said, this debate's a little boring. I actually think that's a good thing. I think right now it's good to have boring, because boring means that they're not playing for entertainment. So that was Kamala Harris. Now, how did President Trump operate in this environment? Now, again, if you're a member of the hopeful majority, you listen to the conversations, we have people from across the political aisle. We have everybody engaged, because my goal is not to support a candidate. It's not to focus on partisanship. It's to try to figure out how we resolve the system of polarization that we live in. Throughout this conversation, you would hear statements like, this is the most horrible administration in all time. There's a phrase they specifically said, the nation is falling down the tubes. There was a lot of anger. There was a lot of frustration. Now, again, a lot of folks will say it's because of the moderators. What I'll say is that I think because the last 8 years have been 8 years of outrage, and because that is what gets your base out, that is the playbook that President Trump defaults to. So, right, you're seeing these playbooks in context. So they're defaulting to this administration, this country, these people are absolutely tearing us down. Now, some of y'all might believe that, but here's my problem with that. My problem is not whether or not that's an accurate statement. My problem with that is when we engage in that type of rhetoric, and when we turn that against each other, we can't actually solve the nuance and complexity of our arguments. Take the abortion section at the top of the debate. That entire abortion section was President Trump telling Kamala Harris, you support, as he said in quotes, executing babies after 7 months. And Kamala Harris would say, you support no abortion at any point whatsoever. You know what the problem with that debate is? That's not where the American people are in that debate. If you look at any poll, they're somewhere in the middle on that. But you only hear the two extremes. And then we're taught to believe, well, we can't resolve any of our issues because these folks exist on the extremes. So we normalize being on the extremes. And if you're wondering, why do we normalize being on the extremes? As we covered in the last episode, we normalize being on the extremes because we radically overestimate how divided we are, and we radically underestimate the power of a conversation. Right now, right as I'm recording this, and you're going to hear this tomorrow morning, I want to timestamp this. Tomorrow morning, you're going to be hearing this. Our BridgeUSA chapters across the country, our student leaders hosted more than 20 debate watch parties across the country with their college students. Republicans, Democrats, all across the political spectrum at these college parties, at these college debate watch parties. Why do I bring this up? These folks are actively organizing what I think tomorrow should look like. If you're trying to build a democracy, call it the United States, e pluribus unum, out of many one, right? That's what we all say, right? Out of many one. You got these young people that are actively trying to build what the fabric of the country ought to look like, while today is about people tearing each other down. And that stark alternative reality is something we got to challenge and fight. Here's the last piece, the third actor. We covered Kamala, we covered Donald. See, I just both sides there. You see all those people that are criticizing me for both sides? Well, I use both of their first names, okay? I use both of their first names, Kamala and Donald. Forgive me. Last category of people, the analysts, the influencers. If you go on my social media right now, I posted a meme yesterday that showed a bunch of people sitting in a casino wildly tapping away at machines, gambling machines, tapping away, tapping away, tapping away. And I said, this is influencers right now trying to figure out how to generate outrage from this debate so that they can capture your attention. Every podcaster that is worth their salt, that is on left or right, every news anchor right now, every debate analyst, their North Star is not analysis, it's your attention. The difference is, imagine I told you that you got a teacher, and I told you that the teacher's goal is not to teach you, but to keep you in the classroom. If I was operating with the goal of keeping you in the classroom, what would I do? I would jump up and down. I'd be a clown, probably make you laugh at each other. I wouldn't try to teach you anything substantive, because the moment I try to teach you something substantive, you're going to try to leave. That's our political analysis in a nutshell. The moment their analysis becomes objective, you turn off. But here's what's special about you. You're part of the hopeful majority. We're BridgeUSA people. We believe in this idea of productive engagement because, yes, it's a little bit less entertaining. It might be a little boring. But ultimately, you know who it helps? The most vulnerable, the most challenged. It helps our veterans that are trying to seek effective foreign policy. It helps those people in the inner city that are struggling because of crime. It helps those farmers in the Midwest that cannot figure out what's happening to their crops as they go through different seasons. It helps those workers in Appalachia that are struggling because companies are leaving their areas and their valleys, and they're left with politicians that have nothing for them but hate for the other. Politics right now is junk food, and the influencers and analysts peddle that. You got an opportunity to opt out. And here's how you opt out. As I've reflected on this debate for the last 10 minutes, the one thing that was clear to me as I was talking about this is I can imagine someone sitting there and saying, what if I don't want to opt out? Because I actually do believe President Trump is a genuine threat to democracy. Or I actually do believe that Kamala Harris is actually destroying our country. I actually believe that. I don't fault you for believing that. I don't fault you for believing that. Now, I didn't say I think you're right, but I didn't fault you for believing that, either of those propositions. Why is that? Well, I think it's because if you took a snapshot of our media over the last 8 years and you took away all of the media that ever existed and you smashed it together, all you would hear is the most extreme, vile rhetoric about the other side. Every part of our society right now is conditioned to get us to anger, to hate, to outrage. Why? Because that gets you money. That gets you votes. That gets you eyeballs. That gets you attention. Yes, you could make a credible argument that the Democrats have real challenges to our administrative state. Yes, you can make a credible argument that President Trump might be a genuine threat to democracy. But what I think is even more important at this time is, how do you prevent these symptoms from growing? Let's actually ask ourselves not who won yesterday night. Let's ask ourselves, why are we here? And beyond that, let's actually figure out, as those students are doing right now at BridgeUSA chapters across the country, high school and college, and hosting those dialogues, maybe we deserve a little better. This is analysis you're not going to see anywhere else but on the hopeful majority, because every time you click on these videos, you share, you subscribe, you are literally opting out of the outrage industrial complex. You know how Ben Shapiro's got his leftist tier mug? Now, some of y'all that are listening are like, who's Ben Shapiro? He's a commentator on the conservative side. He's got these mugs that say liberal tears. I think I'm going to make a mug. Who wants to send me submission ideas for that, by the way, because I can't think of that mug. Here, I got an idea. Comment down below. Submission ideas. What should that mug look like? we need to start building a real majority of people that are listening, engaging. We got to start punching out. Every time you support this show, you're giving a direct thumbs down to all those people that are dividing us. And that's what we got to do. You and I together. Every Monday, YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Next week, we're going to have another great conversation for you, and we're going to keep building this thing. Ultimately, remember that when November 4th happens and there's an election, people are going to have to pull the ballot box. There's going to be a day after November 4th. And someone's got to pick up the pieces. And I think you can do it. I'll see you next week.